Hello friends, Amy R here with Prairie Paper and Ink, and I have the brand new limited edition STAMPtember collab. This one is with Reverse Confetti, and this is the Autumn Blessings stamp set. So to start off with, I took a small panel of Simon's 120-pound white cardstock, and I'm stamping the large floral cluster in the jar onto that with Simon's Intense Black ink, and I'm using my Misty to do this so I can stamp it a couple times to get a really deep, crisp black impression. And then once this is stamped, I am going to color this in with Copic markers, and for whatever reason, I decided to do kind of a dotting technique rather than the standard shading and blending and everything. I'm not sure why that was in my head, but I was like, that's just what I wanted to do. So this is one of those things, again, that anyone can do, really. I went with, similar blending colors, but with something like this, it honestly doesn't matter. You can kind of use whatever colors you want. But I just went in and did yellows for a couple of flowers and just dotting my markers. And then a couple of the other ones I did reds. I received this just gorgeous bouquet, and it's on my Instagram from Heidi to celebrate like the beginning of STAMPtember. And there was this absolutely fabulous red sunflower in it, and it's sitting in my office right now. Total inspiration. So I was like, I need to do something with red sunflowers, and this stamp set, of course, was perfect. So I did red for the other two sunflowers, and then, did some greens for the leaves and the stems, and then just started grabbing like random, like some blue and green and some other greens for the greenery. And the whole time just doing this little bit of dotting. I highly recommend trying it with whatever images you have and just see where it goes. It was kind of fun, and I just didn't have to worry too much about blending and shading, and that's my biggest thing is I overthink everything. So not overthinking and just plopping down a bunch of dots of color. This was like massively therapeutic. Highly recommend. It was fun. So I did my image, and then I was like, okay, I need to do shading and all that. And I was like, yeah, I'm just going to keep continuing with the dots. So I used a bunch of warm grays, added some shadow, and shading at the bottom, but then also started kind of adding them to the background just behind the flowers, just to make things stand out a little bit more, and just lightly kind of worked my way out. And then I decided that I wanted to add some more color to the background. I didn't want it to be just stark white. So I pulled out my big Simon grid paper and some of the new positively saturated inks because I'm kind of obsessed with them. And the colors were perfect because I really liked the color combo I did on the watery glass jar. So I pulled out celery ink as well as seafoam and my blending brushes, and just lightly started blending those onto this panel, just kind of working my way from the outside in. And then after I started blending on the seafoam, it's just really pale. I wanted to slightly intensify it. So I went the shade up, which is Surf. So pulled that out and used my blending brush and just added a little bit of that, and much happier. It just kind of added more of that little bit of aqua color that I love. So I just went around with my blending brush, lightly blended that on. And because these inks are water reactive, you can do, the water spritzing and all that. So of course I'm going to do that. I'm going to add a ton of splatter because that's just what you do. So I just sprayed my hand with water, and flicked it at the background. And the nice thing, because the image and everything was colored with Copics, that is not water reactive at all. So that's just going to sit where it is. I don't have to worry about the reds bleeding everywhere, that sort of a thing. So splattered it with water. And then I pulled up I have this little watercolor palette that just sits on my desk. And in it, I have just a mixture of some white gouache paint and some Perfect Pearl powder. And so I just added a little bit of water to that, splattered that on the background. And then I was like, ooh, I've done this before, but it's always a little nerve-wracking, is adding a white highlight to the glass jar, any sort of glass image. But tried it with the white gouache, but it was too watered down at that point. So I just pulled out some white paint and painted on just right over top of the image. And then I actually took a flat brush and kind of smoothed it out with the flat brush, so it gives it more of like a reflection. So not perfect, but hey, it's still something fun to sort of experiment with. So I went back and forth with that a little bit. And then I just used that white paint and my little paintbrush to add little dots and highlights and all the fun things. You can totally do this with like a white gel pen, that sort of a thing. But the white paint was there and it was already on my brush. So I did quite like using it in this way because the brush gives me a finer tip and a little bit more control than the gel pen would. But again, either one would work just fabulously. So I went along and just started, dotting the centers of the flowers, painting little highlights on the leaves. And then I was like, once I start with this sort of thing, I can never stop. So then I just start painting more highlights. Painted some on the jar and then just went along and painted little highlights to the petals as well. Because again, I'm like, the brush is in my hand and I'm just not going to stop. So added all the random little highlights and things like that. Let that dry, which didn't take very long. And then I'm just going to add more splatter because why not? Why not? So I used Simon's Ocean ink. And like I said, these are water reactive, so you can watercolor with them and do all that sort of stuff too. So I just smushed it onto my little plastic palette, added a little water, and then swirled my brush into that, splattered that onto the background. And then after I got that splattered, it still wasn't enough splatter. So I pulled out my Perfect Pearl powder, put that on the palette, mix that with water, and that gives me the shimmer splatter that I just love. And I'll show at the end of the video like how it catches the light is just so much fun. So splattered that heavily all over this little panel here. Once that's on, I can let this completely dry and work on the other elements, aka the sentiment. So I used a sentiment from that Autumn Blessings set and I stamped it onto a piece of Simon's Peacock cardstock with clear embossing ink. And then I'm going to coat this with some detail white embossing powder. And then I'll melt that with my heat tool. And then off camera, I'm actually going to fussy cut the sentiment. Just because. I don't often do that very often unless there's like a specific coordinating wafer die. There is a coordinating wafer die for this set, but it cuts out the flowers and the flowers in the jar. So with sentiments, more often than not, I'll just cut a sentiment strip, that sort of a thing. But every once in a while, it's worth the little bit of fussy cutting. So I fussy cut the sentiment, and I also cut a piece of black cardstock slightly bigger than my card front panel, and adhered those together, and then pulled out some of my Mayart's twine, and I'm going to get a triple length of the twine, and I'm going to wrap this around my card front, and then use my reverse tweezers to hold the knot in place while I tie it in a bow. Absolute game changer when you're dealing with little cords and twine, baker's twine, all those things. Reverse tweezers should just be in your craft stash. Just, you need them. I have extra pairs because they always grow legs and walk off. So they hold the knot for me so I can sit and fiddle, get my bows the way I like them without fighting. If you've ever tried to tie bows, especially if you're using multiple strands and you don't have something like reverse tweezers, it can be a nightmare trying to like hold things taut and get things working and it's coming loose and blah. So this is the way to go. Trust me. So once I got my bow the way I wanted it, I trimmed off the excess, and then the sentiment, I'm going to pop up with some little foam squares just to give it that bit of dimension. So pop those into place, remove the backing, and then I can pop that right above the bow. So I did that, and then I'm going to pull out some of Simon's Sea Glass cardstock. Wanted something just really pale. This is like my go-to light neutral, really. One of my favorite colors. Anyway, cut the panel down to 6 1/4 by 6 1/2 inches. That's why I have that washi tape on the side of my trimmer to mark those measurements. And then I will score this at 3 1/4 inches. So this will be a 3 1/4 inch by 6 1/4 inch mini slimline card. So I've got my card base made. I'm going to fold it inside out and stick it back in my MISTI so that I can stamp that jar image with the lightest aqua ink, so the seafoam ink. So I lined the jar up kind of off the edge of the card base there. I'm going to ink that up, stamp that onto the inside of the card, and then I'm going to pull out another sentiment from this Autumn Blessing set. I love the sentiments in this set. I love the size of them. They're just fabulous. I say it all the time. Fabulous is my new favorite word lately. So anyway, I lined that up along the bottom of the inside of the card. And then I'm going to ink that up with Simon's Intense Black ink again, and then stamp that a couple times to get a nice crisp black sentiment on the inside of my card. So once that's stamped, I'm now going to adhere my card front to the card base, and I'm going to use some of Simon's Big Mama foam tape to do that. One, it gives it a little bit of dimension, and two, it also helps because I've got that tiny bit of bulk with that twine. Having the foam tape just makes everything adhere nice and flat without making it all lumpy and bumpy. So adhered that into place, and as always, you could stop here, but I gotta add bling because I have enough to add to a bajillion cards in 3 lifetimes. So I pulled out some pearls that went with the flowers. So I've just got some Studio Caudia, I have some apricot, some lemon, and some wine pearls, and just a few, not a ton, just a few. Sprinkled those kind of on the card front, and then I'm just going to adhere these into place with dabs of Craft Tacky Glue. And once those are adhered, I'm going to pair this card with one of Simon's mini slimline grocery bag envelopes. I thought that just kind of brings it all a little bit of a fall touch with this bouquet, and that's going to finish off the card. So I've got that shimmery Perfect Pearl watercolor and the highlights and the splatter and the pearls and love. So as always, there will be info in the description box below the video with links to this set, which again, limited edition, exclusive, one and done. When it's sold out, it's gone. And then all the other supplies I used, all that info will be in the description box below the video. Thank you all so much for watching and subscribing, thumbs upping, commenting. I very much appreciate it. And I'll see you all very soon in the next one. Bye.